Hello, hello, and welcome back to the QCraft Ditch Summit, where we are all about the craft of teaching, digging into those really good instructional practices and the good sound pedagogy and like making it accessible and open to everybody and giving you some really great ideas and inspiration to kickstart your school year. And I'm Matt Miller, the author of Ditch That Textbook. And today we're going to be digging into a topic that I know is a big one in a lot of classes and a lot of schools, and it should be because it's such an important topic. And I think the general direction that this conversation is going to be going in is about creativity and creating in classes and that kind of thing. And super excited about the guest that we have to talk about this because I know that he has been inside of classes a lot, and then also in the Adobe sphere, he's also making a lot of the decisions or helping to make some of the decisions when it comes to education. He's got his fingers in a lot of different things that I think will be really useful to us. And I think this conversation will be a really good, full of little bits of inspiration and lots of practical things that we can do. So, and I've kind of like sold this pretty high, haven't I, Ben? So
yeah, I hope I can live up to the expectations.
Right. No, it'll be good. So, so this is Ben Forta. Ben, can you tell them a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Good to be chatting with you. So yeah, Ben Forta. I work for Adobe. I've been at the company a long time, 20 years or so. And I'm part of the team that's trying to figure out what we need to do to create the right tools and the right offerings for the next generation of content creators. When the kids who are now in K-12 and higher education, what do they need to be able to share, express, and tell their stories? And so I work on a product called Adobe Spark, but I actually act as a liaison between the education community and Adobe. But more broadly, I am an educator. I've been teaching on and off for 30 plus years, if I should admit that publicly. My very first job way back when I was still in school was as a tutor and then as a substitute teacher, and I've been teaching on and off ever since. I still spend a little time in the classroom. I live in Michigan. I teach a high school robotics and physical computing class when I'm here in town. And most of my teaching is for writing. So I've written a whole lot of books. I've taught coding to, I know, 1 million plus people. So that's what I do, both professionally and personally. I spend most of my life trying to figure out how to get kids of all ages, little kids and grown-up kids, excited about building, creating, sharing. The thing that I spend most of my time worrying about is how do we shift people from being content consumers to content creators. And when I see kids walking around with these powerful devices that are capable of all sorts of stuff, and they're, funny pictures and playing games, which is great. I want them to play games. I want them to be tech savvy and comfortable, but I also want them to think about what they can use to be the ones, the purveyors of content, not just the consumers of content. And that's what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's awesome. And there's so much crossover, I think, in what we believe in when it comes to, really good education. And I wanted to start off in that spot about the idea of creating. You said, making that shift from consuming or being real heavy on the consuming side to going on more of the creating. And, I've said for a while now that I think that the students in our schools who get comfortable with creating and who see the value in it and improve their skills in creating, I really feel like they can kind of like inherit the earth in some ways, because there are so many opportunities, especially with the web, where people who know how to create are going to have such great opportunities. And so I thought we would kind of start there, maybe. That Ben, maybe you could tell us a little bit about why you think the idea of creating in classrooms is so important when we shouldn't. And, there's a good parallel there with, the kids that sit and passively consume in classes. We learn sometimes by sitting and consuming, but there's such power in creating. And I'd love to hear your take on why that's so important to make sure that we have in the classroom.
Yeah, that's a really good place to start. So I'll tell you, me personally, I was in school many years ago, centuries ago. I was in school. I was one of those kids who really didn't do well in school. I wasn't a bad kid, didn't get in trouble, but didn't gain much out of the school process. I'm not a passive listener. I need to be engaged. I need to do things. And the old style of sitting there at your desk and don't move and listen to someone lecture at you didn't work for me. And it was sad, and I think it's affected me to the point that I want to try and make sure others don't have to have the experience I had. But there's no doubt about it. It's giving kids the ability to create, and I think we should probably for a second define what create actually is in a moment. But once the evidence is out there, giving kids the ability to create has a huge impact on short-term education outcomes as well as their long-term, their career potential and where they're going to go. So let's take a little step back, because I think it's really important. By now, I think most people have figured out that creativity doesn't mean Monday, 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. go into the art class and draw pictures, right? So
right.
that was the mindset not that long ago. I think most people have figured it out. When we talk about creativity, we're really talking about putting your personal stamp on whatever it is you're doing. I'll give you a simple example. I visited a fourth grade class on the East Coast, and I was watching these kids learning, beginning to learn about fractions. And I saw kids walking around the school holding their iPads, and the teacher had given them a task to discover things that represent a quarter. 4 parts equals a whole. And I saw a little girl walk up to the classroom door that had 4 glass panes on it, holding up an iPad, taking a picture and recording. 4 glass panes, 4 quarters equals a whole. Bam! That is a creative way to take a math concept that can be a little out there, a little esoteric, a little hard to get your grips around, and making it incredibly real. That's a creative teacher and a creative answer to a problem. So creativity is anytime you can allow students or individuals, or anybody for that matter, to take an idea, make it theirs, put their stamp in it, put their personality in it, their life experiences in whatever they're doing, that's creativity, right? So it's nothing to do with arts and design. It's all around individual expression. That's number one. So to answer your question, though, we see both things. We see creativity has an absolute impact on education outcomes. This is now a given. There was a study out of Education Scotland a few years ago that did a large research on teachers who had given kids the flexibility in the class. I forget which age it was, but given the kids to kind of adapt their learning and put their own personality into it. And it's a study, and it's available online from Education Scotland. But there were 6 things that they came away with as a result. That students became far more interested in discovering things for themselves. Win. They're more open to new ideas and challenges. Huge win. They're able to solve problems. That's key there. You're now giving them skills that aren't a specific hard skill, but they're skills that are easily adaptable. Win. They work well with others. Huge win. Right? Collaborative skills are the next big thing they need to learn. They become very effective learners. And 6, and probably most important, is they have greater ownership over their own learning. Now, they're not doing it because the teacher told them to. They're doing it because it's something they want to do. When you can give a child that suite of skills, you've changed. You're no longer teaching them what they need to do this semester. You're setting them up for a lifelong success. So there's no debate. There's no discussion anymore. Teachers that have the ability to, and teachers want to. Every teacher I've spoken to wants to do this. Teachers that have figured out how to give kids that level of autonomy and that level of express their personality and make it theirs, it has an absolute impact on education outcomes, and that's a win.
Yeah, definitely. Oh my goodness. And yeah, just going down through that list of, of things that you said from that study. I mean, coming up with new ideas, solving problems. And, I think a lot of times, kind of like what you were saying, how sometimes we think of creativity as things that you do in the art room, but the world seems to need more and more people who are able to use their creative faculties in different places in the world. I like to point to the idea. Yes, Ben.
No, you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly it. And when I spend a lot of time talking to teachers and talking to district leaders, but I also spend time talking to policymakers and helping them understand. At the end of the day, they're controlling the dollars. And schools, as much as schools and teachers want to do the right thing, sometimes they're being mandated what they can and can't do. And if creativity doesn't show on the list of things I have to address this year, what do I give up to do it? How do I get that balance? And so I spend a lot of time top down as well, just trying to explain that. And so we've done a lot of research on this. And I want to share a couple of stats with you, because this is kind of stuff is mind-blowing that I don't think people realize. So there is now real data from Forrester, from other business studies on the impact of creative potentials in the workspace, right? To the point that 78% of hiring managers believe that creativity is needed for economic growth, and they want to hire people who are more creative, right? Forrester had a survey that said 82% of companies see a strong correlation between creativity and business results. I mean, this is real. At the end of the day, look, I need to be a little careful. I wouldn't want to ever be in a situation where we're letting future job prospects define what we do in the classroom, right? As teachers, we need to be creating well-rounded kids with a broad set of skills that can express themselves in a variety of different ways and have all the communication and collaboration and skills they need. But it would also be a disservice to not make sure that we're arming our kids with what employers are going to want 10, 20 years down the line. and this is what we're looking for. You know, there was a so what the year after year, one of the most sought after, most searched terms on LinkedIn is the word creative. That's now a fact, right? That is one of the most, so that's what employers are looking for. That's what hiring managers are looking for. And if we aren't finding ways to give our kids those that set of skills, it's very, very fluid, very flexible, harder to define, but very personal skills, we're doing them a disservice, right? So there's the education outcome, there's the long-term career outcome, both are vital.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I even think of, you know, even in areas where we don't always think of creativity showing up, like, you know, we had a lot of plumbing done in this house that we had built, and I watched the plumber work, and just to see all of the intricate ways that he took all of those pipes and made sure that they all flowed in the right direction and it didn't cross over anything else. And there was so much creative problem solving just within that. And I think that we really need to think about how we define creativity, because it really is this set of skills that kids can use. Well, I say kids, you know, the kids will grow up to be adults, and in the work world, but also in the school, it's the set of skills that they can use. And, you know, I think I've also seen so many teachers will look at this and they'll agree that creativity is something important and they see the value in it, but then they'll say, tell me if you've heard this one before. They'll say, but I'm not a creative person. And because I'm not a creative person, I'm very uncomfortable bringing all of this creative stuff into class. So let me throw that over to you. To the teachers that say, you know, I'm not a creative person, so I have such a hard time fitting creativity into class, what would you say to them?
First of all, that is so sad.
It is.
Because basically the process and the system has beaten creativity out of them, and they're now unfortunately going to perpetuate that and help their own students think they can't be creative. And that's really, really sad. The reality is that's not the case, right? So part of it is us having to explain to them very clearly what creativity actually is, and that it isn't around design, it isn't media, and it isn't around painting pretty pictures. You know, I like I'm a big fan of Sir Ken Robinson's definition of creativity, right?
Yes.
Creativity is a process of developing ideas that are original of value. And that's a beautiful, big, open-ended. If it's something that is yours and it can be of use to somebody else, you're creative, right? So we got to get them out of the mindset that creativity is specifically tied to the arts. The other thing is it was Edward de Bono who wrote up that they reached a point in the kids' careers at around age 8 or 10 where they start to pivot away from wanting to be creative and more wanting to be right. There's this pressure to get
yeah,
and fear of failure starts to emerge, and they lose their willingness to try new things. They want to know, is this right or not? It's more. So I actually seen this in classes I teach. You know, when I teach my programming and robotics classes, the kids that have the hardest times are the ones who have been so pushed into this has to be right. So when you're writing a line of code, there is no right. They ask me, is this the right way to write? I don't know. Does it work or not? If it works, it's the right way. If it doesn't work, it's not the right way. Right. And that ambiguity that they have a really hard time with.
They hate it, don't they?
Hate it. And it's sad because innately and intrinsically, they have that. They just haven't been allowed and conditioned to do that in classes where often a grade makes a big difference. So our discussion has to be with the educators and teachers that explain what creativity actually is and give them practical examples of where they actually are far more creative than they think they are, right? The average teacher dealing with 30 kids and fifth graders and having to keep manage a classroom and keep them quiet and disciplined at appropriate times is probably using some really creative tools and techniques to manage that classroom. They just don't see it as creativity because no one told it that way. So they need to understand what that is. And we also have to explain to them that this is really important for their kids, and they've got to give them that flexibility and not let that attitude rub off them. Yeah,
yeah, and I think you've just started going down this route. And by the way, I love that idea you just touched on there at the end about how, you know, a lot of times teachers are more creative than they give themselves credit for. And, you know, they're using that creative problem solving. They are thinking through different ways to explain something in a little bit different way so that it clicks in one student's mind where it didn't before. And classroom management is an exercise in creativity. You know, I mean, it's just all over the place. And so
absolutely. Let me give you an example of a really creative teacher I saw sitting in a classroom, and I don't know if this teacher even realized how creative she was being, but it was a uh, so we have a product that lets kids create videos very easily, and yeah, this is not a product pitch, but I was sitting in a class watching kids use this tool, and
Yeah.
I was sitting in a class with in an inner city school, pretty rough socioeconomic neighborhood, and a lot of the kids in this class are undocumented parents. They're not going to get the support at home, not going to get the social support they need. So there are a lot of English as a second language kids in the class. And this teacher was trying to get, I believe it was a fourth grade class, third or fourth grade. She was trying to get kids to be brave enough to speak English in class when they're very self-conscious. They really feel different. They really don't want to stick out. And they just don't want to speak up. So this entire population sits quietly and doesn't interact for fear of sounding off, sounding awkward. And she did something brilliant. I was watching it. It brought tears to my eyes. She literally gave them a slide to record that had a line of text in it and nothing else. And the kids looked at the text, went in the corner by themselves so no one could hear, and pressed record and read the line of text. That was it. It took 10 seconds, done. The next day, she duplicated the slide and said, record it again. And the next day again, the next day again. And after a month, she had the kids just hit play and watch the entire thing and hear their own progress and how reading that single line suddenly sounded more natural. And you see the kids start to smile. Suddenly the smile breaks out and they realize they actually are making more progress than they think. That's a mind-blowingly creative teacher, right? That's not that. I can promise you, we have some really smart people at Adobe. Nobody on the product teams ever envisioned that use case. we never thought that, but you put the right tools in the hand of very creative teachers and they do things that are shockingly mind-blowing. There are really creative people, even if they don't realize that they're as creative as they are.
Yeah, and let's take that example for just a second. Can we try to reverse engineer that? And so look at that example and think, what is it do you think that made that succeed? What drew I mean, just kind of like reverse engineering the creativity and the way that they did that. What do you like about it? And what do you think are the lessons that we could learn just from that example?
Yeah, so what I like about it is it's not about a teacher, and it's not about technology, and it's not even about a specific product, whether it's ours or somebody else. It's around a child and a problem and being empathetic and relating to that child and finding a unique way to help them and solve their solution, right? Technology is not a silver bullet. I was at ISTE 2 weeks ago. There are hundreds, thousands of EdTech options. They're all going to solve every role you ever have. No, none of them are. Teachers are going to solve the problems, and tools, and the technology is just another tool put in the hand of a very capable teacher that lets them do things they couldn't do otherwise. But what makes it work is a teacher who understood their demographic, understood the children, and realized, here's a tool I can use to help bridge that gap. And that's the magic. The magic is not the tool. The magic is the empathy and the relationship and the human face.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to that, I think a lot of times teachers, especially who don't fit, they're the ones who will self-identify as not very tech savvy. And they're the ones, I think, who will look at how other people are using technology and then will try to emulate it the way that someone else has done it, assuming that that's kind of like the recipe for success. But really, if we're looking for a recipe for success, it's what you just said. It's you understand your students, you understand the problem, you look at all of the tools that are available to you. I use the carpentry analogy a lot when it comes to using technology because, we look at when someone sees a new shiny digital tool and they think, oh, wow, I want to start using that in the classroom. That's kind of like the builder that says, I've got this new hammer. So what can I build with this? Carpenters don't think like that. Builders don't think like that. What they do is they amass this toolbox of tools and they understand what each one of those tools will do. And then when the opportunity presents itself, then they're able to pull from those tools the exact ones that they need to create the product that is necessary. So it's not a focus on the tool. It's not a focus on the way that it's used. It's pulling all of those ideas together to get the end product. And in this case, the end product is solving a problem to help kids learn, right? Am I too far off base there?
No, you're 100% right. You need to be solving a problem and tools help you solve it. And you do need to have a good idea of what the problems actually are and how the tools fit. But yes, it is around what problem you're trying to solve, not what tool you want to use. I'll add one other thing to that. So when I do go into classes where there are teachers who are a little tech shy, This happens sometimes when they think their kids are smarter than them and their kids will be more comfortable with technology than they are. There's a very simple solution, and I've seen this work over and over again. Let the kids lead. Seriously, it's perfectly fine. It is absolutely fine to say, we've got this new tool we're going to use today. I hear from other teachers and other classes here that the kids love it. I don't know it yet, but this, you over here spent the weekend learning it. How about you teach the class for us and show us how to use it? There's nothing wrong with that. Let the kids lead, let them guide, let them figure out how the tools are. It works beautifully. I've seen this done in so many classes where the kids become the tech leads. And then I'm seeing even more and more where the 7th, 8th graders become the mentors and teach the 1st, 2nd graders how to use it. Yes. Kids are digital natives. This is natural to them. I mean, I have kids. I have a 5-year-old grandson, right? Every screen he sees on the planet, he expects to be a touch screen. And if he sees on the slide, he thinks there's something wrong with it. He grew up with a different, the base slide is set in a different place. These kids are digital citizens first and foremost. They are going to be always more comfortable. Yeah, I'm tech savvy, but they're going to be more comfortable than me. They're going to be more comfortable than any of us who are a bit older. That's the reality. Let them lead. They'll be more than happy to help you. You don't have to have the answers at all. You have to understand what their needs are, what their problems are, talk to other teachers, talk to groups, figure out what tools to put in your arsenal, and let the kids help you figure out how to use them. Yeah, and that's so hard sometimes because that's so counter to the traditional role that I think teachers have felt like their job is. They think that they're supposed to be the sage on the stage and they're supposed to be the one. We knew that was going to happen, didn't we? That's okay though. No, that I think that they think that they're supposed to be the ones that are leading. And even I've seen in schools sometimes when it comes to evaluation time, sometimes they get dinged a little bit because they're not doing that traditional, the way that we think education is supposed to look from a teacher. But the reality is that kids are really owning it, I think. And yeah, I think you're really onto something there. Yeah. So I don't know a teacher. I've never met a teacher yet who likes assessments, right? I understand why we need to be able to measure success and we need to figure out what's working, what doesn't work. And I get it, but I think the pendulum between how much autonomy teachers should have for what's best in their classroom versus how much is pushed top down standards and the dollars associated with it, I think the pendulum's in the wrong place and it needs to shift back. And I think we're seeing a trend towards that. That's a reality. And so it's the job of educators and it's the job of companies like mine and others to figure out how we can help teachers bridge that gap and give them tools that fit into what they're doing right now rather than try to change what they're doing. And that's part of what I have to worry about. But you're right. It's I'm waiting for the day where creativity is a top-down mandate and every school has to somehow implement it. But that's going to be a blessing and a curse because when it happens, then there'll be a measure creativity, and there is no creativityometer that I'm aware of, and so it'll create artificial assessments that make no sense, and we'll be teaching that as well. So that's probably not a good idea anyway. It comes back to autonomy and doing what's right for the kids. Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, so to this point, we've been talking for 20 minutes or so, and we've been kind of like painting the picture, I think, of the importance of creativity and creation and creating over just solely consuming and all of that. So let's start to turn this in a little bit more practical direction. And I think you started to do this earlier, but I want to be a little more intentional about it. So to that teacher, let's go back to that teacher that says, I don't feel like I'm much of a creative person. I don't know really how to teach kids how to be creative. Are there any tips that you could give teachers or any suggestions that you could give teachers to help foster these skills, to help foster a more creative environment? And I know you just said, let the kids lead. I think that's probably, that's a good place to start the list, is to give kids opportunities to lead. And then they kind of make their way the way that they need to, which is an essential element of creativity, I think. But are there any other things that you would suggest to those teachers that want to do it, but they're not exactly sure how? Yeah, so I think the next thing I would add to that is it's one step removed from let the kids lead, and that is where appropriate, be a little less prescriptive. I'll give you an example. I visited one school where it was I forget the exact grade. I think it was a 6th or 7th year, and the students had to do a research passion project over the course of the entire year. So they had to research the needs of indigenous communities and identify problems and so on. And what I loved about the projects were how open-ended the teachers had allowed the students to create. I saw some students who were designing artboards. I saw some where they showed me the work they were doing, where they had written scripts and had their their fellow students act in front of a camera, and they're using green screens and posts to try and create a video to tell their story. I saw others creating dyeing textiles to match what the indigenous communities would do. I saw some really ambitious ones using laser cutters to cut up models over the course of a year.
Wow.
The key is what this teacher had figured out is that if you allow what the assignment needs to be about is do research, understand something, and be effective in how you communicate. Now, traditionally, that would have been turn in a 2,000-word essay, double line space. And
right.
This teacher said, no, research it as you see fit. And as long as you understand the topic and can get up there, make a presentation, and share your idea and communicate, tell a story, and be effective in communication, you get your pass, you get your A. Now, that doesn't work for every subject, I get it. That's the extreme example to me. But I think if we can be less prescriptive and give kids a little more flexibility in what they do where appropriate, for the average research paper, let them find tools that embed images and videos. They're going online searching, find the appropriate YouTube video, teach them about Creative Commons licenses and attribution, let them embed it in there. Doesn't have to be, once upon a time had to be all your own work or you were dinged for cheating. No, we live in a remixable world and kids should be encouraged to do that. That's the real world. So find ways where you can be flexible and give them a little more latitude in telling the story their way. It'll be more work for the teacher. Grading it's a little harder because you're not comparing apples to apples. I get that, but that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I love that. So, so there you go. Those are the 3 tips that I've gathered from this: is that let the kids lead when possible, be a little bit less prescriptive. You gave that example of the open-ended projects, and then I also heard you say that the general idea of so many of these projects is research, understand, and communicate. And as long as you're able to do those things, like you said, that doesn't work everywhere. A lot of times in English classes, kids have got to write and they've got to know how to write formally and all of that. And so, just finding a way to communicate doesn't always work there. But I think those are some really good tips. So I think that was really good.
When I'm talking to kids a little older, high school kids or students starting college, what I remind them, what I emphasize to them is no matter what you're going to do, if you're going to get whatever your qualifications are, whatever career path you're embarking on. There are 3 skills you're going to need that are probably not taught in the classroom that are fundamental that every employee is going to need in the future. And I call them my 3 C's, and they are your creativity skills, just show something uniquely yours. They're your communication skills, because there are people who had the greatest ideas in the world that die because they don't know how to share the idea properly.
Right.
What is the pitch? How do you share an idea properly? How do you synthesize points? How do you get to the point without random? Just fundamental communication skills. And the third is collaborative skills, right? You go in the average office nowadays, the days of everybody working in a queue by themselves are long gone. All offices, all environments are collaborative spaces. Companies, when they're hiring, don't want somebody who's the same as the last 20 they hired. They want diverse ideas and they want them to work together. So it's the communication, it's the creativity, communication, and collaboration. It's a combination of those 3. And students need that, and I encourage teachers to try find places to work that into whatever they're teaching. Find places where kids can collaborate together and mix them together properly. Find ways wherever I saw one school I went into where it was a science fair time of year, so big auditorium, lots of projects laid out on tables, everybody with the traditional trifold cardboard. This teacher went a step further. Every single project had a teeny QR code on the bottom right. And as the parents could walk through, they could scan it with a phone, and that came a video, just a short video of the kid talking about their project. Right? Yes. Now, the kids never would have spoken to adults in the real life because they'd be a little scared to. But here, with their friends, they're recording. It was beautiful, a demonstration of creative communication in action. Find situations like that, because those soft skills, those creativity, communication, collaboration skills are fundamental. And no matter what I spent most of my time in K-12, about 90% of it. The other 10% I spent in higher ed. I was in a Ivy League school, meeting with a nursing school, and they were showing me how they use our video tools for a use case, again, I never thought of. And this is teaching nurses how to deliver information to patients and their families empathetically. Right? Wow. You got to deliver news, bad news. And so they wanted these nurses to record themselves, play it back, look at their facial gestures, look at their video. Brilliant. That's just it's a fundamental communication skill.
Yeah.
And if you're a nurse, you better learn, and you might pick it up on the way. Better to learn it properly. So across the board, these are fundamental skills they need, and they're all part of that broader creativity umbrella.
Yeah, yeah. Oh yes, yeah, absolutely. You know, in fact, as you were talking about your three C's, your creativity, communication, and collaboration, that made me think of how the National Association of Colleges and Employers puts out its job outlook every year. And so for 2018, I just pulled it up here. You know, the skills that they're looking for in incoming employees. Number one is problem solving skills. Two, ability to work in a team. You know, there's your communication, your collaboration right there. And then you've got leadership as number four. You've got verbal communication skills is in the top 10 also. Flexibility and adaptability, you know, that's in the top 10 also. And we don't have a class on that. So those are, you know, the people like to call them soft skills. And they kind of poo-poo them a little bit. But those are the things that employers are really looking for. And I think we're doing kids a disservice if we don't at least think of them. We don't have to explicitly teach them, but I think we've got to think about them.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing is that this next generation of tools that our kids are using have some of the stuff built in. I mean, yeah, that's what I love about a tool like Google Docs. Is, you know, it's funny. 10 years ago, two kids sharing a project would have been dinged for cheating. Now it's actually the expected behavior. You know, you're supposed to collaborate and share together. And I walk into sixth grade classes, and they're peer reviewing each other's content. That's amazing. That's beautiful, right? So the tooling is actually making it a lot easier to do this. We need to not be scared, and we need to embrace it and realize that these are fundamental skills that our kids are going to need as they get older. No matter what they do, they're going to need it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad that you brought up Google Docs too, because I think sometimes in this techie world, especially when you get wrapped into social media circles and, you know, go to lots of conferences and stuff like I do, you know, I start to see all of the new tools coming out. And sometimes a tool like Google Docs, I think, gets kind of put on the back burner because we're like, oh, that was so 4 years ago. And now there's all of these other flashy things, and we ought to try those. But the reality is that a lot of those things that have been around for a while, they really work, and they'll serve the kids just as well. So I want to make another kind of like shift in this conversation, since this is kind of like the practical side of the conversation. You know, we had our big picture side at the beginning. So let's get down into some specifics. And we were just talking earlier about how sometimes people will look at what others do with technology and they'll think, oh, that must be the way to do it. But so we don't want to just like copy and paste the things that people do blindly. But there's also a lot of value in seeing what other people do because it gives us ideas and it inspires us. And so that's kind of the direction I'd like for us to go next is, now, obviously, like you said, a big part of your job is to work with Adobe Spark. Adobe is the sponsor for the Q-Craft Ditch Summit. And so, you know, we're as we mentioned earlier, this isn't a product pitch. We're not going to talk about, you know, just about Spark, but I know there are probably some examples with it and then maybe with some other tools that you've seen in schools where some of those creative faculties are really put on display and are put to good use in classrooms. And so I wanted to throw it out to you and see if you had some examples that you've seen in the classrooms that you visited and some of the students that you've worked with yourself that might be able to inspire us.
Yeah, so you're 100% right. I mean, teachers, when I talk to teachers, the number one place they go to for inspiration is other teachers, right? And most of them are not going to ISTE, right? Most of them can't afford to. They're going to the small local meetups, so a couple hundred teachers on the weekends. They're finding each other on Twitter. It's the Twitter chats and QAs, and those are great. I love those. It's a primary way for them to share, you know, the hard-earned knowledge from spending time in the classroom and being a mentor and giving it to others. And there are lots of educators who I'm big fans of, and I follow a lot of their Twitter feeds to see what they're coming up with. For my own education inspiration, I'm always amazed what people are doing with the products, ours and others. So yes, it's really, really important. In fact, one of the projects I'm working on right now is, you mentioned Adobe Spark, and so Spark has been phenomenally successful with education. It's a fun tool. It's very perfectly suited for K-12. It's free, which makes it even more popular in K-12.
Right.
But one of the things that I'm working on is actually nothing to do with Spark itself. I'm actually working on a project right now that will hopefully be online for back to school, which is a library of practical examples and use cases. You know, if I'm a 3rd grade math teacher, a 6th grade social studies teacher, what do these tools mean to me? So putting a very real world lens in it. So there's a need for that stuff, and we're always collecting those stories. So yes, there are lots and lots and lots of them. There are lots of examples, and I build an ever-growing library of them. Everything from, you know, the field trip and the So I've gone to schools where kids as young as kindergartners and first graders are creating videos about their field trips. The teacher's gone with them and taken a whole bunch of pictures and put them on a shared account that shows up on all the kids' iPads, and they're all creating their own video using the same set of pictures. I wish I did that when I was in preschool. I might have actually enjoyed the field trips.
Right.
I've seen everything from research papers rewritten to there's an example over in the UK from a couple of years ago. So this is a science teacher who a couple of years ago there was a British astronaut who became the first astronaut to join the space station crew, which is a wonderful teachable moment. So every science teacher in the UK, they all watch the launch and they all use it as a chance to talk about space and space travel and so on. And this teacher asked his class if you could ask him a question about space, what would it be? And they weren't overly enthused. And so he had them instead turn their questions into beautiful posters, with the right images of galaxies and stars and star travel and so on. And suddenly they're not asking questions, they're creating fun projects that express their questions. Beautiful, I love that. One of my favorite examples, and this has become truly one of my favorite, and I use it all the time now. So there's a teacher who I had the pleasure of working with on and off the last couple of years in St. Paul, Minnesota. And he uses video tools. He actually uses Spark Video, but this works with any video tool. He uses videos for book reports. And one of the things that a lot of teachers will tell you when they're trying, the reason we give kids book reports, assignments, is primarily to measure reading comprehension. It's not really about the writing. It's to get them to read and measure reading comprehension. A lot of kids don't like reading. A lot of kids like writing even less. And so if you're trying to measure reading comprehension by their written report, you're having a hard time with that. So he made a decision to kind of divorce the two. We have writing and you better learn how to write. But for several years now, all of his fourth grade students' book reports are all videos. And he uses our tool and they have to create a professional video that we're introducing the plot, who the characters are, and so on. And the videos are spectacular. They don't use images, they all use icons. They've got a huge icon library, so it's a little more abstract and they've got to describe things properly. And he publishes online. They actually have a Twitter hashtag for all of these stories, and there are hundreds up there, and they're spectacular. And what's really cool is some of the authors of those books have started tweeting back to the kids who were reviewing those books. Now, game changer. I mean, that's taken the century-old boring book review and turned it into something fun and engaging and relevant and exciting and public and with a social presence as well. That's a game changer. So there are lots of really, really good examples. And the key is, here's what's really key. The best examples I find are not when we're trying to introduce a whole new concept in the classroom. It's taking something we already do and finding a fun, more engaging way to do it. It makes it easier for the teachers. It fits into curriculum better. It solves the problem of assessments and standards because you're actually doing what needs to be done, just a better way of doing it. And if teachers can find ways to take what they're already doing and just inject that fun, personal experience into it, everything changes.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah. No, those are great examples. That's good stuff. Since a couple of several of those examples you mentioned did have to do with Adobe Spark. Can you give us, just for the people who aren't as familiar with it, can you give us just the real quick sort of like nutshell explanation of what it does, like what those tools will allow you to create?
Yeah, absolutely. Adobe Spark is a content creation tool. Adobe is people when you think Adobe, you think of Photoshop and Illustrator and our big tools that the pros use to create content, and those are great. We love tools, and a lot of students have access to those tools as well. Spark is a different way of thinking about content creation. It's content front. It's a much simpler workflow. It creates very polished professional results, but with a very much simpler, more fun work process. It creates three things. It creates videos, and the videos can have in them icons, images, video clips, your own voice, narration, and so on. It creates images, graphics, where you can combine elements and text and so on. And it also creates long-form stories and web forms. You're basically building a web page with text and images and video in as well. It runs in any web browser on any device. It's optimized for Chromebooks. It runs on iPads. We have iPad versions with us as well. It integrates with the school login, so they use their standard school credentials, their G Suite for Education, and it's totally free. So that we work with the school and district, and we integrate it and deploy it, and every kid gets it. So it's a very fun tool that's very easy. We see a lot of schools who use it in conjunction with Google Classroom, for example. So for a research paper, kids will work in Google Docs, paste it into Adobe Spark, make it look gorgeous. When it's done, take that link, put it back in Google Classroom, and it works really, really well. So your end result is a video, a long-form text page, a web page, or an image. It's a really simple content creation tool, and you can see everything you need at spark.adobe.com, spark.adobe.com, or actually go to spark.adobe.com/edu, and you'll get the education page with examples and how to get started and more.
Very good. Yeah, that's perfect. And thinking back to some of those examples you gave us earlier, you talked about the video book reports. And I've got to say, one of my favorite examples of seeing video in schools is whenever kids, and this is kind of the same idea, is whenever kids create book trailers. They've read a book and they're excited about the book, and then they create a little video that has their personality, their fingerprints all over it. And they put it out into the world. And then in the library, they'll take the book covers and they'll put them up around the library with a QR code, or they'll use something like, it used to be called Erasmus. I can't remember what they've renamed it to, but one of those augmented reality deals where they take the book cover, and if you scan it with the app, it'll put a video of their book trailer right over the top of it. And I love that because kids are talking about first of all, they're talking about books that they love. And the more that we can get kids talking about books that they love, I think the more that the love of reading and creating those lifelong readers, and we know that readers are leaders, and that's the literacy is this huge skill. But I start to think about those video book reports you talked about, and I thought, my goodness, there's such far-reaching potential for that. Because it doesn't just have to be about books. It can talk, you can do that about practically any sort of content, and letting kids create. Again, we're going back to this whole idea of creation, letting kids create with what they've learned. Now, all of a sudden, they're assembling their mental construct of how this concept works and how it fits in their world. They're able to make something that has their personality in it. And oh my goodness, if you want kids to remember something and have it mean something to them for the rest of their lives, have them create instead of just regurgitate on a worksheet. I don't know if there's a question in any of that, but I was thinking, you mentioned that, and my mind just kind of exploded on, that could work in science. That could work in a second grade class. That could work in a health class.
I agree. And I'll add another twist to that. It also works for a population that otherwise could be marginalized in the classroom. So I have lots and lots of examples. Some of the most emotional ones I've seen are from teachers who tell me their kids are shy and won't speak up in class. I had one teacher who sent an email saying that using our tools, and it was well into the school year, this kid had never spoken up, and he went to the corner and recorded his project with a video of himself as a project, and his teacher was in tears. She said it's the first time in the third grade, near the end of the year, that she'd actually heard a student's voice. Mm-hmm. She'd never heard her speak before. I have a teacher up in Oregon who shared a video with me. The video is actually on YouTube, of a young man explaining the scientific method, and this young man's on the autism spectrum. He won't speak up in class, but he's a really bright young man. I mean, his video is really, really polished, a lot of good information. He won't speak up in class, but give him a tool to go in the corner, record his own video, and play to everybody. It works beautifully. So it gets back to the right tools for the right job. So yes, the mind explodes beyond books and science and everything else we use this tool for. The other side of it is also different kids are going to need different ways to express themselves. They can't all use Google Docs. They're not all going to write. They're not all going to work through the same tools. And having a diverse set of tools that lets them communicate in a way that means something to them, their voice, their personality, their expression. That's what, as educators, we want. That's the win.
Yes. Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. Okay. So to kind of wrap this up, we've been talking a lot about the whole idea of creativity in the classroom. And, a lot of times we think of how giving kids the opportunity to be creative in the classroom can improve their outcomes in the classroom, right? I mean, there's significant, it's like you were saying earlier, you were citing research that shows that there is significant improvement in achievement whenever creativity is pulled in. But it's not always necessarily just improving education outcomes that is the reason for doing this. Would you agree with that?
I agree completely. So yes, it improves outcomes, but also, frankly, just creates a more engaged class. I mean, just forget outcomes. Just the average teacher will be much happier if all their kids in the classroom are engaged and happy, and rather than doodling and scribbling notes and dreaming off. So yes, longer term outcomes, but just actual engagement improves. And then I'll even add to that there are some students who traditional learning are never going to engage, and it's imperative. We have an obligation, a moral obligation, actually, to allow every kid to participate in the process. And different kids need different tools and different ways of interaction. And that actually is probably the most important immediate benefit of creativity. Is, we started off early on defining creativity as being something personal. It's your voice. It's something original of your value. by definition, that means something that works the way I work and not forcing me to conform to how others work. And that's probably the single most immediate benefit of injecting creativity in the classroom, is it lets every student be part of the process in the way that works for them.
Yeah. Oh, this has been great. This is awesome. I know my brain is spinning in a million different directions with this, and I think that one of my big takeaways from this conversation is that there is no right specific way to bring creativity into the classroom, and that if you're understanding your students, and if you're helping them to get to the end goal, and you're coming up with a way that works. I mean, that's sort of the definition of teaching with creativity. And to me, I would think, hopefully, to those teachers that are going, I'm not really that much of a creative teacher. A, you probably already are. And B, hopefully this empowers you to realize that you've been doing it all along. You know what I mean?
I agree.
Yeah. Very good. Well, this has been awesome. Ben, thank you so much for joining us for this. If people want to get in touch with you, tweet you or in whatever means, I was looking on your about page on your website, and I noticed that you still have an ICQ profile listed in your contact me, which I think is awesome. I used ICQ when, years ago, when it was still going. So if people don't have ICQ, what's probably the best way for them to reach you?
The best way to find me is on Twitter. I'm on Twitter all the time. So on Twitter, I'm at Ben Forta, BenForta. You can also find me at forta.com. And I welcome everybody's feedback. I do respond to every tweet. I respond to every email. I love hearing from educators. Let's keep the dialogue open.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're watching this video, we will have a lot of the good stuff linked in this presentation. So if you're on the Ditch Summit page, you can just scroll down and you're going to see lots of links of the kinds of things that Ben was talking about. We're going to have some specific examples, all sorts of things that you can check out. If you want to see, maybe some examples that can spark some inspiration for you to try this in your own classroom. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. Ben, again, thank you so much for joining us. And I hope to see you on the next segment, the next session of the QCraft Ditch Summit. Thanks, folks.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.